We've got a job to do.
In March 2020, a national state of emergency was declared and quarantine measures enforced as the COVID-19 pandemic spread through the United States of America.
I'm officially declaring a national emergency.
It's not life as usual.
This is a national emergency.
For Raven Software, co-developers of Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, suddenly the future of the next game in the biggest FPS series of all time was in jeopardy.
I thought, well, this is going to be impossible.
I was so nervous and sort of heartbroken to realize that this was now up in the air and wasn't going to be able to continue at all.
But Raven didn't allow the project to slip into disaster. Detailed plans turned into smart solutions, and work on Black Ops Cold War continued, despite the whole team being miles apart.
I thought we were dead in the water. Suddenly they were like, hey, we're going to have a recording session. And I was like, I don't understand, how's that possible?
Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War released on November 13th, exactly on schedule. This is the inside story of how Call of Duty was made from home during a pandemic. At the start of 2020, Raven Software had already been working for months on Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War's campaign. The team had started production on the majority of the main missions and had begun to lay the creative foundations for the side missions. Development was going well, and the game was on course for the classic Call of Duty autumn release window. By March, there had been more than 2,000 confirmed cases of coronavirus in the US. As state quarantine measures were implemented, it became clear that development of Black Ops Cold War was about to become significantly more difficult.
And when this started to happen, it was just like we all felt it, right? The whole world, we were like, well, I guess half the studio maybe needs to work from home for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden it was, wait, the whole studio? Can we keep some people in? And it kept snowballing to where I remember thinking, well, if it goes longer than 8 or 10 weeks, like, how can we possibly get everything done we needed to get done? We had this list of, we must complete these goals for this to be considered a great Black Ops game. And we were looking back going, okay, we've got a little bit of all this, but can we get it to the point where we have them all?
Raven transformed into a work-from-home studio and set to work on attempting to achieve its goals despite the stressful circumstances. But the team knew that some tasks were going to be easier than others.
Mocap and honestly VO is somewhere where I thought we were dead in the water. It's like we can rearrange our lives to have meetings, and figure out how to stream stuff. But to get actors to come in, I thought, well, this is going to be impossible.
I was so nervous and sort of heartbroken to realize that this thing that I had been so excited to be a part of was now up in the air and wasn't going to be able to continue at all. Were we going to have to put it on hold for, indefinitely? How long would it be on hold?
If you would have judged it based on about the first 8 weeks, I would have thought, oh my God, I don't understand how we're going to get here.
Despite everything, the plan was still to launch Black Ops Cold War in November. But with no sign of the pandemic fading, Raven had to work out how to create cinematics and in-game performances without access to a state-of-the-art studio. As programmers, artists, and producers continued to work from home, the narrative team devised a plan to keep their cast of actors in the game.
So the first thing was working to figure out those remote recording kits. So when we realized that the engineers were still able to record, we worked with Activision to figure out the tech for these kits. And that was, using some of the PCAP technologies, those headsets with the microphones.
Keep it professional, Belle.
And then acoustic treatments for the actors' homes. And we had to make it all user-friendly enough that these actors would be able to use it.
I was staying in my old family home. I was staying in the home that I grew up in, which was built in 1787. And I turned this old sewing room into my recording room. So I had this tiny little room that was meant really just for the sewing machine. And I just filled it with pillows and foam. And I created this little recording studio. And they sent me this giant Pelican kit. It looked like I was being sent $1 million in cash. Every time the FedEx guy came up, I was like, I hope someone's watching because I look like I'm a badass right now. And inside this kit, they had created an entire recording booth that was portable. So I brought it into my little sewing room, and we had headphones, and you clip these little antenna microphone onto the top of it with a whole bunch of wires that you put together, and then everything was set up right there. And it was absolutely incredible. It was so user friendly. As someone who's, I'm not extraordinarily tech savvy, I'm something of a Luddite, and the fact that I was able to do all of this recording from the comfort of my 18th century sewing room was really quite sensational.
The base is just over the next ridge. Get in, learn what you can, and get out.
We would always have a phone call ahead of the recording schedule where the engineer would walk them through. Oftentimes it was a video call from their phone, just showing them where to plug things in, getting it all up and running and making sure that it sounded okay.
Copy that! Get your team out of there, Adler! Copy that! Get your team out of there, Adler!
Unsurprisingly, creating Call of Duty's signature cinematic style in remote working environments came with its challenges. But while inconvenient, both developers and actors began to find positives in this strange new process.
Going back into my little sewing room and doing all of this on my own was such a treat as an actor, actually, because it really made me engage my imagination in a way that we often don't have to as much. Nowadays, you get to be right there with the person and, the sets that are built and the costumes that you're in. And there's so much of the legwork that's done for you. So by the time you often get onto set, you feel like you're in this world. But when you kind of wander in your pajamas into your room that's full of comforters and pillows, and you're like, okay, now I have to be in a war zone.
We were in these recording sessions sometimes for a day. And so we kind of got to go through this experience together.
You put your hand on the table to show your gambling cards, and someone stabs a knife into it. Nice work.
It was uncanny. It was like being in a recording studio, except that every once in a while I'd hear a toilet flush and pipe down over there
And get out.
Good. I like, B or C. I'll go with C.
As time went by, the team began to find better ways to make these new, unconventional methods work for them.
Lily Cowles would make her own props. Even though she's recording voiceover and not mocap, she kind of put herself on the stage, put herself in the scene, and was carrying her guns around.
Well, I borrowed my nephew's little fake rifle, and I was just like running around with this rifle in my sewing room. And the imaginative process became so much more engaging. And I think that was really fun. I think it took me a couple of sessions, I would say, to really find that groove. And then when I did, it was wonderful. There was something actually really freeing about being totally alone. We were capturing this during a time of enormous social anxiety, and it was so cathartic to be able to scream my guts out.
Death scream. Well played, sir.
With actors set up with home studios, Raven managed to pull together the voice recordings it needed to put words into the mouths of its characters. But dialogue was the easy part. The team also had to work out how to do the motion capture needed to animate the game's cast, something normally done on a cutting-edge soundstage surrounded by dozens of cameras.
The most complicated scenes are when we're interacting with the environment. At Raven, at the mocap studio, we've got like 30 cameras all set up, super high end to capture everything possible. And so I just didn't understand how we could replicate that. But they ended up buying these mocap suits that you could wear. They would build little mini sets, whether it was in their basement or a room in their house, and they would record the action through these suits with the animator over the webcam directing them, saying, no, grab that table to your left when you fall, because we're gonna animate this thing to flip over you.
3, 2, 1, bang! Yes.
When I saw the actual recording session of that and then saw it in game, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna work.
Gathering voice and motion capture remotely was a challenge, but even tasks that didn't require specialist performance gear needed to be adapted. Working remotely meant designers, programmers, and artists were putting together the game without the ease of in-person communication. But the team's perseverance and self-motivation kept the project on track.
We had this whole plan for evidence that you could unlock on the side, on the safe house and the evidence board. And none of that had been done. Like, the planning had been done, but none of it had been done in March. And so April, May, June came along, and that was a big piece for me, where I was like, you guys, this was supposed to be one of our pillars, the fact that the player doesn't just go from mission to mission, that they have this choice.
Head to the evidence board. We'll retrace our steps through Denang. Anything that could give us a lead on Perseus.
This is a great scene where Mason and Woods are hanging out in the safe house, and the player doesn't have to talk to him, but they're allowed to walk up and talk to him. And this was a weird thing for me. Normally in development, I see it every step of the way, right? Like from very first block in. But work from home, the team had to take a lot more on their shoulders, and the team did an incredible job saying, okay, I don't have everyone around me I can't just grab somebody to look at my desk. I'm just gonna make decisions. Suddenly, I saw this scene that I'd never seen before in game. I walked up to talk to him, and Woods is giving me a hard time, and Mason's kind of chiming in. It's like they felt like the Mason and Woods I loved, and I was like, oh my God, I've never seen this since we left for March, and all of a sudden it was July, and it was in the game, looking good, and I was like, holy shit, we're gonna do this.
If you're trying to be friendly, this is the dumbest way to go about it.
We're just f***ing with you.
After months of improvisation and adaptation, things were looking up for Black Ops Cold War. But despite the team's triumphs over the circumstances, time proved a difficult challenge to overcome. It was a situation that, for the game to release on schedule, required Raven staff to work longer hours. This is a practice heavily scrutinised by the gaming community, with critics arguing that projects should be delayed to allow development to be completed during regular working hours. But for Black Ops Cold War, the November release date was maintained. We asked Activision about the nature of this overtime and how it was enforced, but received no comment. According to Vondrak though, staff at Raven were motivated to put in the additional hours.
Everything took longer. The part that I guess was lucky for us is that, I mean, people say this all the time, but this really was a passion project for the team. I mean, there's not often you get a chance to say, hey, this is one of the greatest games we've ever played in Black Ops 1. Let's write this love letter to Black Ops 1. And so people were so jonesed to work on this that it was worth the extra hour. So everything took longer for sure, but we found ways to get around what we thought were impossible barriers previously.
The overtime hours put in by the studio staff provided the project extra time, which kept development on track. And as production continued, the team discovered that some aspects of working from home were actually more helpful than expected. Actors having recording equipment in their homes made pickups quick and convenient. With that in mind, did this working from home setup actually make development more efficient?
To be as blunt as possible, it's like, no, it's just like we're probably running around at 90% efficiency. What really did change, and again, maybe this is a good thing, ultimately, was we used to be able to sit in a room together as a team. Grab, 30, 40 people, sit, play through a chunk of a level or a whole level in real time, walk up to the screen and point and touch. That's a bummer we can't do that right now. But the bonus, I will say, is that forced a lot more people to be playing the game a lot more. So those same 30 or 40 people where we would have just a couple people playing and everyone kind of commenting and pausing it, suddenly we were getting opinions that we might never have gotten before. Man, we got tons more ideas, I will tell you that, over these past 6 months, where it was just like, it was almost hard to keep track of everything and go, whoa, there's just so much more feedback than I normally have gotten in this kind of a cycle. So pros and cons, but I would love to return to the office, but then we'll take a few lessons from this.
Raven has learned a huge amount about the way it operates during the development of Black Ops Cold War, particularly about how its staff work. Lockdown has revealed the benefits of remote working, and these are lessons that the studio could potentially carry over to a post-COVID world.
When people have a workstation in their home, it's certainly a burden mentally, right? Because you feel like, oh man, should I be going into work? But there is this awesomeness of like, hey, I can be with my family or loved ones or whatever, and then I'm just gonna go into the other room for 10 minutes on a Saturday morning and check something, and it's like the communication turnaround, just to be able to go in for 10 minutes, leave, then go back in for another 10 minutes here and there. That's when I really started to see during the summer where I thought people were gonna wanna be like, listen, I'm sick of work from home. Suddenly, every day of the week, everyone was chiming in at different hours. And it was because there was almost like this, you know what, this works for my schedule. I can jump in for 45 minutes, leave, go be with my family, jump back in for half an hour. We learned to not be able to communicate. We're talking now, you ask me a question, I answer it right away. That's how it normally works in development. We learned to go, you know what, you're not gonna get your answer for 2 hours, but that's okay.
Against seemingly insurmountable odds, Raven Software completed development of Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War in November. The game released, exactly on schedule, on November 13th, just as the next generation of consoles went on sale. Unsurprisingly, it's been an emotional victory for the people we spoke with.
I never had a doubt. The people at Treyarch and Raven and, these studios, they're so on top of it. There was never a moment when I thought, is this going to be able to happen or not? I was always just thinking, my God, these are the vanguards. They're the people who are pushing the industry forward and developing technology that other people are going to wind up using, that other industries will wind up using. But I love that it's actually these, video games that are so often pushing technology forward.
This is my first COD title, so there's a lot of excitement just to be a part of it and to say that we got it all done. I've been so impressed with the team here and with the leadership both at Raven and Activision throughout this process. It always felt like safe and transparent, and I'm just really glad to have been a part of it.
I look back, and one of the things I realized, like I said, right around the August or so time period, where I was like, man, we accomplished all these goals we had hoped, like these original pillars we wrote down that what Black Ops meant to us. Could we achieve that? Then could we add in this whole other set of pillars we wanted to? And we achieved all those. It took a lot of individual effort. I will say that. Like, it just took people to make decisions, put a lot on their shoulders, and be willing to work longer hours from home, even when they've got families. So I'm really proud of what the team was able to accomplish for sure. And like I said, man, this was the kind of love letter we thought we were going to write when we first got started on this project. And it's cool to see that it all came together for sure.
Raven's situation shares several of the problems that many of us have had to endure during the coronavirus pandemic. The isolation of working from home, the difficulties of remote communication, and the struggle of performing seemingly normal tasks in an unsuitable environment. In addition, the goal of finishing development ahead of a November release date meant staff worked longer, tougher hours during a period that was already filled with challenging obstacles that demanded far from usual levels of adaptability. This will never be the ideal way to make a game, nor one Raven will presumably willingly return to, but the team built a AAA shooter under the harshest, strangest conditions, all while working from home. It's a story many developers across the world will have their own version of, and hopefully, one we'll never see again in quite the same way.
Yes. Cut.
Sorry, you wanted to
No, that was actually very good.